Hear this, daughters of Joseon. You are granted exactly 7 sons within these walls to prove your virtue. On the final evening, the throne will claim its new mistress. This sweeping imperial decree ignites a ruthless, time-limited competition among the empire's elite noble families. Yet, far from the glittering court, a forbidden magic mirror whispers an unsettling prediction. A foreign challenger has emerged, possessed of a spirit so potent it could upend the dynasty if she ever crosses paths with the sovereign again. While the calculating Lady Nari schemes to bend the entire empire to her whim, Ann Ranney, a striking African dancer whose heritage is beautifully woven into the crown of her majestic royal braids, as captured in Desire's escape, not an empire. But when a dangerous street alley forces her to shield an incognito King Robert Bryson from a deadly ambush, a profound connection is forged, threatening to burn down the rigid, centuries-old traditions of the royal. Heralds blew their long brass trumpets, their voices echoing across the stone courtyards of the Joseon palace as the grand imperial decree was delivered to the kingdom. Hear this, daughters of Joseon. You are granted exactly 7 sons within these walls to prove your virtue. On the final evening, the throne will claim its new mistress. This sweeping announcement ignited a frantic, high-stakes countdown among the empire's elite noble families, each desperate to secure the lonely King Robert Bryson's hand. Yet, far from the bustling streets and glittering courts, deep within the dim, shadow-drenched chambers of the wealthiest estate, a different kind of preparation was underway. Lady Nari stepped before her ancient, forbidden magic mirror, her eyes gleaming with a cold hunger for absolute political power. She demanded to know who stood in her way to the throne. The surface of the glass rippled like dark water, and a chilling voice whispered a hidden prophecy into the room. Another lady has risen, Nari, a foreign flower whose spirit is tied to the king himself. If they meet again and fall in love, there will be no stopping them. Nari's breath hitched as she demanded to see the girl's face, but the mirror remained clouded, veiled by an unseen force. Some ancient magic shields her identity from my sight, the mirror murmured. But this protection is temporary. It will shatter entirely on the day of the final selection, which is her 21st birthday. Only then will her true face be revealed to you. Nari gripped the edges of the frame, her gaze hardening with lethal intent. She would wait for that day, ready to destroy this mysterious rival before she could ever steal the crown. The heavy silk screens of her mother's estate could not contain Ann Ranney. As the night deepened, she slipped past the sleeping guards, her heart drumming to a rhythm only she could hear. Beneath her modest cloak, her vibrant spirit yearned for something the rigid aristocratic world of Joseon could never offer: absolute freedom. She made her way through the labyrinth of narrow alleys, heading toward a hidden, subterranean music chamber where the wealthy and the artistic converged in secret. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of burning incense and the hypnotic thrum of traditional drums. Anne shed her cloak, stepping into the center of the floor. With the long, intricate braids of her hair swaying gracefully around her shoulders, she began to dance. Every leap, every fluid turn of her body was a plea to the universe, a desperate hope that some influential traveler would recognize her rare talent and help her escape to those distant, free Western nations where no one could control her destiny. At that exact moment, blocks away from the underground sanctuary, a solitary figure moved through the shadows of the capital. King Robert Bryson had shed his embroidered dragon robes for the plain, coarse linen of a commoner. Back at the palace, the suffocating pressure of the impending bride selection and the ceaseless demands of his royal council pressed down on him like a physical weight. He needed to breathe. He needed a single night where he was not a monarch or an air-producing instrument, but simply a man. Walking the dim streets incognito, Robert felt the crushing walls of his reality recede, replaced by the cool night air and the distant, enticing echo of a drumbeat echoing from a hidden doorway. Drawn by the unfamiliar, pulsing energy, the disguised king stepped downward into the smoky light of the secret chamber, completely unaware that the very woman destined to upend his kingdom was already dancing in the center of the room. The sudden splintering of wood shattered the rhythm of the drums as a band of armed thugs burst into the secret chamber. They moved with lethal precision, surrounding the lone commoner in the corner who carried himself with an unmistakable, regal poise. King Robert Bryson barely had time to brace himself before the first glass bottle swung toward his head. He ducked, striking back with fluid palace martial arts, but the sheer number of attackers, at least 15 men armed with heavy clubs and blunt objects, began to overwhelm him. From the center of the floor, Anne did not hesitate. Driven by an impulsive urge to protect the stranger, she vaulted over a low table, her movements a blur of acrobatic grace. Using the incredible agility born from years of street dancing, she swept her leg low, knocking 2 thugs off their feet simultaneously. She intercepted a swinging weapon meant for Robert's back, spinning fluidly to redirect the force and hurl another attacker into a wooden pillar. For a breathless, chaotic minute, the African dancer and the disguised king fought side by side in perfect, unspoken harmony. As the last thug crashed to the floor, the distant shout of royal guards echoed from the entrance. Knowing her presence there would ruin her family if discovered, Anne pulled her cloak tightly around her head, obscuring her features in the dim, smoky lantern light. Robert reached out, desperate to catch the hand of his mysterious savior, but she slipped through his fingers like mist, vanishing into the dark alleyways before he could ever see her full face. Left standing amidst the wreckage, the king could only stare into the void she left behind, his heart racing, utterly captivated by the memory of her mesmerizing eyes. The iron-reinforced gates of the imperial palace groaned open, swallowing the procession of elegant palanquins arriving for the royal selection. Stepping out into the sweeping stone courtyard, Ann Ranney looked up at the towering, tiered roofs of the Joseon palace, her breath catching at the sheer scale of her new reality. Beside her, her fiercely loyal maid Zoe gaped in disbelief, whispering that their assigned quarters were larger than their entire family home. Anne tried to maintain the rigid posture her mother had rigorously demanded, but her free-spirited nature resisted the confinement. As the noble candidates were lined up, Anne instinctively shifted her weight, her feet itching to move, nearly tripping over the heavy silk hem of her structured robes. She adjusted her majestic royal braids, a low laugh escaping her lips at Zoe's wide-eyed awe, earning a sharp, disapproving glance from a passing court lady. Farther down the courtyard, wrapped in the finest silks of the Joseon aristocracy, Lady Nari stood perfectly still, a cold contrast to the warmth of the spring morning. Her gaze cut through the crowd of hopeful brides like a blade. Instructed by her dark mirror to watch for anything unusual, she scanned the courtyard with a vigilant, predatory intensity. Her eyes lingered on the foreign candidates, searching for any sign of a hidden threat, any gesture or grace that seemed out of place among the traditional noble houses. When her piercing eyes swept past Anne, Nari's grip tightened on her silk handkerchief, sensing an unfamiliar defiance in the air. The 7-day countdown had officially begun, and within these suffocating walls, the battle for the throne was already underway. The grand pavilion was silent save for the rhythmic rustle of fine silk and the soft snip of iron shears. The first official trial of the royal selection had begun, testing the candidates on their refinement, patience, and mastery of traditional embroidery. Rows of noblewomen sat gracefully over their wooden hoops, meticulously stitching traditional, safe patterns of plum blossoms and crane birds to appease the strict court judges. Among them, Ann Ranney stared down at her blank fabric, her mind refusing to conform to the rigid expectations of the palace. When she dipped her needle, she didn't craft the expected motifs. Instead, guided by her vibrant heritage and a yearning for change, she wove a bold, radiant sunflower stretching toward the light, flanked by a magnificent butterfly breaking free from its cocoon. It was a striking, unconventional masterpiece representing profound transformation and a journey toward a beautiful new life. As the judges walked the rows, Lady Nari glided past Anne's station, a condescending smirk playing on her lips. She spared a glance at the canvas, offering a loud, mocking sniff meant to draw the court's disapproval toward the foreign girl's audacity. An elegant palace demands standard tradition, not the wild daydreams of a street wanderer, Nari whispered smoothly, hopping to shame her. But the scheme backfired. The head judges stopped dead in their tracks before Anne's hoop, their eyes widening in sheer fascination. The unparalleled creativity and deep emotional resonance of the butterfly caught them completely off guard. Murmurs of genuine admiration, rippled through the older court ladies, completely overshadowing Nari's sharp insults and drawing the first major spotlight of the competition directly onto Anne. The second trial brought the aroma of simmering broths and roasted spices into the royal kitchens, transforming the space into a highly competitive battlefield. For the culinary test, the candidates were tasked with creating a dish worthy of the Queen Dowager's demanding palate. While Lady Nari and the other noblewomen relied on rare, extravagant ingredients and hyper-formal palace recipes, Ann Ranney chose a completely different path. Standing before her workstation, she closed her eyes and recalled the comforting, rustic aromas of her childhood. She began utilizing rich, traditional cooking techniques passed down directly by her grandmother, secrets of perfectly balanced seasoning and patient slow simmering that could extract deep, soul-warming flavors from humble elements. When the presentation began, the contestants displayed elaborate, intricately carved dishes that looked more like sculptures than food. Nari offered a golden bowl of traditional abalone porridge, smirking as she stepped back, confident in her superiority. But when the Queen Dowager reached Anne's station, she paused, drawn in by the rich, mesmerizing fragrance wafting from the foreign girl's earthenware pot. The matriarch took a single spoonful of the rich broth. For a breathless moment, the entire kitchen fell into a dead silence. Suddenly, tears welled in the Queen Dowager's eyes as the complex, deeply comforting flavors touched her heart, evoking fond, forgotten memories of her own youth before she was bound to the throne. Reaching out, the elder royal bypassed all court protocol to gently grasp Anne's hands. "You possess a rare and beautiful gift," the Queen Dowager murmured softly, her face softening into a warm, genuine smile. "In everything you touch there is love. You honor us, child." The affectionate address sent a visible shockwave through the room. Watching from the sidelines, Nari's face contorted with a silent, blinding rage. Her fingernails dug painfully into the palms of her hands, her mind reeling at the sight of the most powerful woman in the palace openly embracing a foreign outsider, completely shattering Nari's carefully laid plans for total dominance. The moon hung high over the palace, casting a silver sheen across the still waters of the royal pool. Unable to sleep under the weight of the escalating competition, Anne walked the quiet garden path, looking for a moment of peace. She paused at the water's edge, the cool night breeze rustling her hair. A sudden footstep on the stone pavilion made her turn. Emerging from the shadows was King Robert Bryson, dressed in his royal robes, but carrying the same exhaustion he had worn the night they met in the city. Anne froze, instantly lowering her head to bow, but the movement caught the moonlight, reflecting a sharp glint from the unique crystal beads woven into her long, majestic braids. Robert stopped dead in his tracks. His eyes traveled from the shimmering hair beads to her striking, expressive eyes, and a wave of shock washed over his face. He recognized those eyes instantly. They were the same ones that had fiercely protected him in the smoky chaos of the midnight brawl. "It was you," Robert murmured, stepping closer, his voice filled with a mixture of awe and profound relief. "The dancer from the secret chamber, I have looked everywhere for you." Anne's breath caught, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Your Majesty, forgive me," she whispered, stepping back toward the edge of the courtyard. "I should not be alone with you. Court protocol forbids it." "The court watch," Robert said softly, his tone tender as he reached out a hand, desperate to prevent her from vanishing again. "The palace walls are closing in on me, and you are the only one who has made me feel alive in a long time. Tell me who you truly are." A fleeting, breathless moment, they shared an intimate, unyielding gaze under the starlight, an unspoken bond crackling between them. But the distant echo of approaching guards shattered the silence. Terrified of the severe consequences if she were discovered alone with the monarch, Anne panicked. She pulled her silk sleeves tightly around herself and fled into the dark corridors, leaving the king standing alone by the water once more, his hand extended toward the empty night air, entirely captivated by his foreign flower. Desperate to capture the king's elusive affection, a calculating rival lady sneaked into Anne's private chambers under the cover of darkness. Having spied the king's late-night fascination at the royal pool, she stole Anne's distinct outer robes and hurried to the water's edge. Hopping the familiar garment would trick Robert Bryson into noticing her. Meanwhile, Lady Nari stalked through the palace courtyards, guided by the sinister murmurs of her dark magic mirror. The mirror pulse vibrated violently as she approached the gardens, warning her that the scent of wildflowers and rain, the exact mystical aura tied to the dangerous foreign rival, was thick in the midnight air. Nari rounded the stone pavilion and spotted the figure cloaked in Anne's stolen clothing, standing by the edge of the deep pool. Mistaking the decoy for the actual threat, a cruel smile twisted Nari's face. Without hesitation, Nari signaled her personal guards to seize the unsuspecting woman. The decoy lady was gagged and dragged into the shadows before she could even offer a plea or explain her foolish deception. Believing she had successfully neutralized her enemy ahead of the final selection, Nari watched the heavy iron locks click shut on the dark holding room, utterly convinced that the throne of Joseon was now entirely within her grasp, while the real Ann Ranney remained safely asleep in her quarters. The dawn of the 7th day arrived, bringing with it the final, high-stakes selection and Anne's 21st birthday. Deep within her shadowed chambers, Lady Nari stood before her dark magic mirror as its surface rippled violently. The ancient protection shattered at last, revealing a clear, terrifying reflection of Ann Ranney's face. Realizing she had locked away the wrong woman, Nari's face contorted with absolute malice. She instantly dispatched a squad of armed guards into the palace corridors with a singular, ruthless command. Eliminate the foreign girl before she could ever set foot in the throne room. Unaware of the impending danger, Anne walked down the stone hallway, her long braids styled into a majestic royal updo as she prepared for the final judgment. Suddenly, the armed assassins lunged from the shadows, swords drawn. But Nari had severely underestimated her target. Anne did not cower. Instead, she and her fiercely loyal maid, Zoe, sprang into action. Treating the deadly assault like a fierce morning exercise, Anne used the breathtaking agility of her street-dancing years to duck beneath a slashing blade, executing a fluid spin that sent one attacker crashing into a lacquered pillar. Beside her, Zoe disarmed a second guard, using his own wooden staff to block a lethal strike. Fighting in perfect harmony, they dodged, struck, and seamlessly neutralized the ambushers, leaving a trail of groaning guards in their wake. With her chest heaving and her eyes blazing with fierce determination, Anne straightened her fine silk robes and hurried toward the court, refusing to let Nari's cruelty steal her destiny. The heavy, lacquered doors of the grand throne room flew open with a resounding crash just as the final moments of the selection were slipping away. Ann Ranney stepped across the threshold, breathless but unyielding, her majestic royal braids perfectly framing a face alive with fierce determination. A collective gasp rippled through the gathered court and the rows of assembled ministers. Lady Nari, who had been confidently smoothing her silk robes in anticipation of a default victory, froze as her face turned a ghostly, horrified pale. King Robert Bryson rose instantly from his gilded throne, his eyes locking onto Anne with a profound sense of relief and unmistakable adoration. Nari stepped forward in a desperate, final bid for power, pointing a trembling finger. "Your Majesty, this is highly improper. She is a latecomer, a foreign outsider of no noble standing." But the king silenced the entire chamber with a sharp, commanding raise of his hand. Walking down the steps of the dais, he bypassed Nari entirely without offering her so much as a glance. He stopped directly in front of Anne, gently taking her hands in his. "I have made my choice," Robert announced, his voice echoing with absolute authority through the pillars of the hall. "She is the one. From this day forward, you are my queen." Nari shrieked in absolute ruin, screaming that it was not fair, but the royal guard stepped forward on the king's command, stripping her of her aristocratic titles and dragging her out of the pavilion. For her treasonous plots and dangerous schemes, she was condemned to the far eastern agricultural farms, destined to spend the rest of her days working the muddy fields. Later that evening, far from the suffocating protocols and the watchful eyes of the state ministers, the grand palace chambers sat entirely empty. Breaking royal tradition one final time, King Robert Bryson and his new queen, Anne, slipped past the gates to celebrate their victory in their own way. In a quiet, secluded courtyard hidden deep within the imperial grounds, the soft glow of hanging paper lanterns illuminated the cool night air. Soft pink cherry blossoms drifted lazily from the branches above, scattering like confetti around them. Wrapped in a stunning, deep red royal hanbok woven with intricate gold thread, Anne leaned into Robert's chest, her long braids catching the silver moonlight. They shared a tender, breathless embrace under the starlight, their hearts beating as one, finally free, completely in love, and ready to rule a new era together as King and Queen of Joseon.